Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books. We had a little technical difficulty, but I think we might have it resolved now. Thanks for bearing with us. We're trying something new today, which is live from a remote location. And, you know, necessity breeds invention, something like that. But here today, we're going to be at the workshop of Sarel and Bekah Karelis. So here they are. I'm not going to waste any more time. Take it away.
Hello.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you could spend time with us at our workshop. We spend an awful lot of time here. Today, we're in the wood workshop of Adventures in Elegance. We're located on 18th Street in downtown Wheeling. And today, we'd like to share some magic with you. And I think Bekah is going to start us off by getting us into a PowerPoint presentation as soon as we've introduced ourselves.
Yes.
Let's start off with the prettier one of us. Bekah will start off.
Hi, I'm Bekah Karelis. I have been working with Sarel for 2 years now. Many of you know me from my time at Wheeling Heritage as historian. He finally lured me away from my position there, and I got to join him in all the fun that he was having here as part of Adventures in Elegance, a company that has been around in West Virginia since 1992.
Yes.
Which he's going to tell you a little bit about. To start off, we have a lot of projects going on. One of our biggest right now is Fort Henry Club and the porch restoration there, and that is what we're going to show you a bunch of photographs as the work has progressed over the last 10 months. But first, Sarel wanted to tell you a little bit about his company and the history of it and some of the projects that he has worked on. And according to Sean, this is a first. We're going to show you some PowerPoint slides, so I hope it comes through okay. I'm going to move the camera to show you just some of those slides, and he'll give you a brief introduction of the company.
Okay. I guess we can go to the slides while I start. My name is Sarel. I am originally from South Africa. I found myself in America by choice since 1984, and West Virginia by design. I could choose to live everywhere I want to. I want to live in West Virginia. It's a wonderful place to live. I have chosen to make my career in restoring our history, the actual physical form of our history in the form of buildings. Started off many years ago, 1992, doing plaster restoration, and did so exclusively and a lot of it on the road and all over the country and all over the world. Lately, in the last 5.5, almost 6 years, we've been in West Virginia exclusively, and we have worked out of Wheeling particularly, with very, very few exceptions. So welcome to the workshop, and let us show you a little bit of what we do. Can we zoom any closer on that, Bekah?
Yes. There's a slight delay here.
Oh, there's
don't worry.
delay. Okay. So the first slide I'd like to show you is one of the trips that we did out of the state. Well, it's still in the United States, but this is on the island of Hawaii, on the North Kohala coast on the Big Island. This is the Kalaikioli Church, which was destroyed in an earthquake in 2008 and subsequently rebuilt in 2009. We were given the challenge of restoring the plaster on the exterior, on the newly built exterior wall, and the plaster had to look exactly like the old plaster. The old plaster had a lot of deficiencies, and the challenge was to create the same deficiencies as it was before, so that by the time we left the project behind, it would still seem like an old plaster. And it does indeed look like the 1850 church today. And there is a completed version. It was very enjoyable working in Hawaii. We did 2 projects there. This is an arch. It was one of the original structures of a fence around the property that was also rebuilt in lime and the original rock that fell out of the original arch. A very enjoyable place to live. This is the Huli Palace, destroyed in the, not destroyed, but damaged in the same earthquake. Had a lot of fun doing the interior restoration of that. As you can see, the earthquake did a lot of damage to the ornamental plaster as well as the flat plaster within the building. And it took some ingenious repairs and methods to bring all of that back together again without destroying it all. It was very, very enjoyable spending time in Hawaii for a considerable time. Here you can see some of the damage, and thank you, Bekah. I think we can roll around. This project I'm showing you here is the St. Patrick's Church in West Virginia. And here we see what water damage does to a project. A little bit of water over a long period of time does a lot of damage to interior decorative plasterwork, and in this case, it ate all of it up. As you can see, after excavation, many layers of repairs needed to be done, and maybe on the next slide we can see what it would look like afterwards. Yes, there's a similar area afterwards, and as you can see, there is many moldings that had to be drawn with a knife, and there are also some castings that had to be reproduced to put that together again. And all of that was capped off by new decorative painting, as well as just a full paint scheme finish on the project. We spent quite a bit of time in St. Patrick's Church, and again, it was a very, very enjoyable project. I do enjoy decorative plasterwork. Here are a few more close-up pictures of that. On the right-hand side, you'll see the picture of us working on the site in many different locations. And here you can see some detail of all of the ornamental pieces that had to be remade in order to recreate the shapes that we have there. In this particular picture, you can see a knife that reforms the shape, and the knife is then drawn, or the knife is attached to a shoe. That's the wooden portion, put on a fulcrum that gives you the desired arch, and it's then drawn through fresh, wet plaster of Paris, and that gives us the shape. Towards the end of this presentation, for you to look forward to, we're going to draw our own little plaster molding, and I will show you what that procedure looks like. I consider it to be high magic, and I'm impressed every time it happens, and I giggle like a child because there's no bigger pleasure. Here on the left-hand side, you can see a knife in the process of drawing a molding through plaster on the table. And on the right side, you can see a collection of newly formed plaster of Paris pieces through the knife, as well as some castings out of the plaster of Paris. Again, very, very enjoyable pieces. This piece of stained glass, as well as the ornamental paintwork and the figurative paintwork that you'll see coming afterwards, was done by Erin Rothenbuehler, that currently works at the library. She's a very gifted artist, and she designed and executed this wonderful design in the ceiling of the St. Patrick's Church in stained glass. This is a lot harder than it looks. Here again is her figurative paintwork on the ceiling, as well as some of the detail that we have in the church there. Very enjoyable place to work, beautiful people. If you're ever in Weston, please stop by and say hi. This project is a capital replacement at the courthouse in Roanoke, Virginia. And if you can see in the background, we have a few terracotta capitals, and in the foreground we have a remade capital in GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete, which is the same process that we are following now, and replacing the capitals at the Fort Henry Club, and we'll get onto that just a little bit later. This project you might know. You might have seen it around town in process. This is the first Capitol building belonging to Mr. Pat Cassidy, which has been an incredible caretaker and a patron for that building and bringing it back up. Here it's getting a facelift and a new layer of exterior stucco to go over it. And this was completed about 5-6 years ago, I believe. A little bit of a segue. This is ornamental plaster. This is actually the price installed with a cake decorating bag and then formed with little knives and little trowels and things afterwards. Very unique remake of an original artist that did this, and I believe in about 1920s, 1930s. We worked on about 4 projects that the same artist made. He never signed it, but we could see from the way that the work was made that it was definitely done by the same hands in the same way. Again, very, very enjoyable work. This is terracotta, and you would recognize this from buildings around town. We have quite a few buildings around town that have this detail on the exterior of the buildings, and here you can see some damage done to terracotta. This normally is where, as a result of water intruding behind the face layer, and then the water would expand the metal that's to be found within it. And as the metal expands through rust, it forms a crack in the terracotta and could potentially fall many, many layers down to many floors down to the street below and cause damage. Here we are in the process of repairing and replacing some pieces. I believe this was in Bekah. Where was this again? I forget.
Gettysburg.
Oh, this was on the plaza at
Circle.
Bank Building at the Circle in Gettysburg. That's correct. Again, very enjoyable type of work. Around town, you might have recognized this structure. This is on the Scottish Rite building on the pediment of the front door on 14th Street. This was originally made in New York in the 20s, Bekah, is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. Like 1916.
1916, thereabouts. It was then brought here and assembled. Again, a terracotta sculpture that's hollow, and it was put together by reinforcing bars in metal and cast with concrete to keep it all together. Over a period of years, the rebar, the jointing wasn't kept up, and water leaked in and it rusted the rebar, and sections of the wing came apart. In this case, the wings were disassembled, hollowed out, and recast with new steel reinforcement to give it another 100 years worth of life. West Liberty University. This is a new installation of a restored piece that's in the boardroom. These pieces were in bad shape and originally installed in a hallway with the remodeling of the building. I can't remember the building's name. Bekah, can you?
Shaw Hall.
Oh, this is Shaw Hall, of course. So it was removed from the hallway, restored, and then reinstalled in the boardroom with a new finish. Do we have a damaged picture there? No, we
I don't believe
have a damaged
so.
picture. Okay. Here are a few shots, not very good ones, of the Minnesota State Capitol. One of the many ways that we cause damage to historic material without realizing it. In this case, they wanted to save money by shutting down the air conditioning system over the weekend when nobody was in the building. This is the 3rd floor rotunda over the Capitol Dome, and the resulting temperature and humidity change in the building brought a whole year's movement to the plaster in 1 week. So that within a year, they had so much accumulated damage from all the metal that supports the plasterwork moving, expanding, and contracting, that it caused an enormous amount of damage. We have a wonderful trade, and it encompasses so many facets. It's so hard to condense it all to the small period of time that we have to share with you. But I'd like to hand you over to Bekah now, and she will tell you a little bit about the Fort Henry project that we are currently working on, and you might have seen us doing downtown.
And sorry, guys, I apologize. We thought we could zoom in on our PowerPoint, but it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm going to go through these pictures as fast as possible so we can get on to the good stuff, which is show and tell and a little bit of demonstration. So I'm going to be holding the camera closer to the PowerPoint so you can actually see the photographs while I talk. So brace yourself. I hope you took your Dramamine. So this is the Fort Henry porch prior to work starting about 10 months ago. It had seen a fair amount of movement on the porch surface, also within the walls, a lot of wetness. There were some collapsed, downspouts and underground piping that had caused a lot of subsidence underneath the porch. There had been several iterations of a porch over the years. I think we know of 3 that we did uncover as we had to remove everything underneath the porch in order to get down to the ground and start rebuilding anew. This was just prior to the work beginning. So this is what the piers looked like. Here you can see one of the little urn pieces, the base of the urn, which we will show you. We have one of the original ones here, which will also be a casting project later on in the year. We have the original railings. We're going to be working to restore those. And in order to bring them up to code, we're going to be adding some sections to make them taller. This was laid with a terracotta tile. And as you can see, especially over here, you can see how much waviness there was to the porch. Here we are removing the stones from the sidewall, which we uncovered a little bit of a surprise. We were expecting these stones to be much more substantial than they actually were. But when we removed them, we could only found stones of a depth of maybe 3 to 4 inches. So because they were wet for so long from the substrate behind the stones, they're very soft. They're sandstone to begin with. And the amount of wetness that was within them just made a lot of degradation happen. Here you can see we're taking the stones off the face of the wall. It was basically a rubble and dirt fill behind, made of clay, which we could not reuse because a clay fill is not compactable, unfortunately. These are our friends at Thaker Excavating. They helped us remove everything from the porch, including the very large stepstones. This is right outside the French doors off of the sun porch. And here you can see after we had removed, what was it, Sarel? 78 tons of soil, dirt, and fill to get down to the ground so we could pour new footers for the support walls. And this is kind of a quick fast forward. We had refilled the entire porch area with the 78 tons. This time we used a limestone compactable material. The wood that you can see is where the capstones would all go. What we ended up doing was pouring a concrete surface on the top of the porch where there were once terracotta tiles. We removed them, and working with the architect Christina Schlesser on this project, they planned to put a stamped concrete provided by Colorcrete in South Wheeling that kind of looks like a terracotta tile. I have a picture of that in a little bit. This was quite an endeavor, removing all of the porch surface. This area underneath the columns is the original porch, and there was no movement under that section of porch, so we did not need to remove that down to the ground level and rebuild. This is probably one of the most visible parts of the project, and it's the beautiful column capitals. Originally the scope specified that we were just to remove the paint and repaint them. And as you could see here, they're terracotta. In this pink section, we would basically try to remove the paint, which is this really thick section here. There's probably 15 layers of paint. But when you chip off the paint, which was very cracked, you can see the cracking here, the part of the terracotta would come off with the paint. And that completely destroyed. I mean, that is destroyed terracotta at that point. No amount of paint is going to keep that thing together. Water will get in and eventually it will fall apart. So we are here. Sarel is, he took down a couple sections of the column capitals and put them back together. And using clay, he resculpted the missing pieces. And you see him here, resculpting it. And Sarel, I don't know if you want to say anything for this part.
No, it's enjoyable and tedious, time consuming. But there you can see the mold afterwards. I'm sorry, Becca, you take over.
No, that's okay. This is your labor of love.
Oh, okay. So this is a mold rubber that was formed over the clay. In this case, polyurethane rubber with an ashore hardness of 35, which means it's relatively soft, so it can uncurl over all the detail of the three-dimensional. I'm sorry?
Save a little bit
Okay,
for whenever
I'll
you
do
show them.
All yours.
All right. And here's Sarel installing one of the new capitals. As you can see, we have 3 up out of the 6. That's a slow process. We had to cast these. We do 2 at a time. And we're going to show you more about that here in a minute, the actual molds themselves. And here's just something we threw in. We do a lot of mold making and recasting of pieces.
Oh, by the way, look at that picture behind you. You see behind the bucket? Look at all the stones for stifles stacked there.
Yes.
Those are all GFRC stones that was made quite a few years ago from stifle. If you can show it here.
Here's the picture. Those stones are these here.
Yeah, so all of those stones that's lying there ended up on there.
Sure.
That's right.
And so keep that picture here. So this is what we're casting. This base here is what we're casting here. There it is underneath its mold. And there it is putting back in place. We did that project 3 years ago, I think.
I think so.
Okay, back to Fort Henry.
Mhm.
Here we are. The columns were largely unsupported. They were sitting on the capstones of the original porch, which did a good job, but there was also, because of the subsidence of the porch itself, there was a lot of movement in the column bases. You can see here underneath this column here, we have a new cast GFRC base. They were originally wood. Here you can see this is part of the mold making process. This is the original base. This is the base that Sarel cast. It's the same profile. It's cast in plaster, which is what he needs to make a mold out of. And here they are going back in. This is one of the original, well, this is the original column and the new base is there. We were, never worked with this before, but this is galvanized steel. And it is what the facade is decorated with, all the portico, all the details, the dentils, the top of the building is all painted metal. So we had to remove the paint all the way down to the metal because we had a lot of this. We had a lot of rusted metal with sections missing. So we have to go down to the base and we need to patch those. We use a filler. We use more galvanized steel. We do some riveting. Combination of repairs, and then we repaint it again. And here you go, you can see this is the scraped and repainted portico. You can see the 3 new capitals there. Here's just the ceiling, a beautiful coffered wooden ceiling. Some of the progress shots. That was also a lot of work. It was hard on the shoulders. And a lot of people don't know that the front door is actually a revolving door. So we tore off what they had covered the revolving door with. And there's going to be a new storefront, aluminum and glass, mainly glass, so you can see the revolving door. It's going to really highlight the feature. And so where we are in the project now is we have started putting all the stones back. We put the steps back, we put the piers back. We're at the repointing step. We're finishing the capitals, and we're hoping to wrap up this project within the next couple of months. Here's just some progress photos of the piers going back. And here's that new stamped concrete floor that looks like terracotta. And one project that we're very excited about is the 4th floor ballroom. At some point, they had put a drop ceiling in the 4th floor ballroom, and now they're bringing it back. We are going to be working to restore that in the coming months. So that is that. So we will move on.
There we go. So as a segue into a new section while Becca is moving us around, I want to make you aware that the whole world of plaster repair is it's a vast field of different things. It's not just flat work and it's not just ornamental work, but there's a lot of things that you come across that that you might not suspect. I'd like to show you this piece. Becca, where am I concentrating? Can you see it from there?
Mhm.
Can I see it from there?
Yes.
This little bowl is made from a product called scagliola. Scagliola was invented, if you would, by in the 15th century by Benedictine monks, and it was meant to emulate marble. Marble in the round was very difficult to produce in those years and very painstaking and time consuming. So in the cathedrals, they would do real marble up to a point, maybe an 8-foot point where people could reach, and further up above that, they would make this scagliola product, which basically comprises of plaster of Paris, mineral pigments, and rabbit skin glue of all. And then technique. The product is cast, and then it is highly polished to make it look like a marble. In this case, this was just a little project as a demonstration, but normally it would be architectural features and architectural work. It is not practical to make scagliola new as a commercial product anymore, because now it is cheaper and more effective to form new marble and to hone new marble into the shapes you wanted. The only work today done with scagliola is repair work, and there's quite a bit of those. A lot of examples to be found in B&O railroad stations, old theaters, very popular in the 1920s in the high art buildings right before
The B&O railroad stations, like
Correct.
they installed it.
a lot of those things. So we started off showing you some plaster reproductions that was happening. All plaster reproductions all happen in either one of two ways. Either you have flat work that's run on a table or running into place, in which case you need a knife made. In which case you need a knife that has the shape of the existing. These are when you're doing a reproduction, you actually go on site, make a slit in the plaster, put a piece of metal through it, scribe it, and cut the piece of knife to emulate what you need. The knife is then put into a shoe, which is this wooden piece, and the shoe is then run up and down a table while wet plaster is put in front of it. And that gives you a shape as this is, and we're going to run a little piece of this here in a little bit. Of course, this is all more of two-dimensional type of work, and as soon as you're talking about three-dimensional work, such as replicating a piece like this, in this case, this fell from the ceiling at St. Patrick's Church, a good 35 feet or so to the floor, shattered into many pieces, and when this has to be reproduced, obviously a knife wouldn't do it. Now you need to make a rubber mold of the existing. So you would go to a piece that is existing, and you would form the rubber over it, and then pour your new material into that rubber mold. More about that in a little while. I want to show you, and I'll bring it to you, but again, here is another knife and another mold. In this case, the stifle project that we just talked about. And in order to replicate in this case, a cornerstone of the detail and stifle, first you need an original. To form the original, you have to grade it out of thin air. In this case, you need a knife, you need to run straight pieces, and then you need to cut the straight pieces into the shape you need, put it into a box, and then, this one is pretty old and falling apart, but then you pour rubber into the shape that gives you a form. And when this rubber is again formed into a box, you can then cast the original in GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete, into it to have the original piece. And so everything basically starts off with running moldings and running knives. So that's a process that we're very familiar with. And again, for me, it's high magic. I really love that process. Going back to site Fort Henry, you can see what Bekah was talking about. In this case, the original piece is so deteriorated that anything you take off of here leaves you a very disturbed surface underneath it, which is why all had to be resculpted. Now, you have to be careful in restoration when you do the resculpting not to go to a pristine new condition. So when we sculpt, we don't want absolutely new pristine looks. So you do go to a somewhat beaten up look, if you know what I mean, an aged look. I'll help you drag that closer. So this is the mold. So this is mold rubber. So this is called the rubber mold, and then this is a supporting mold or a mother mold that keeps it in place. And the GFRC, the glass fiber reinforced concrete, is sprayed into this, and this is then flexible enough that you can release it. And we've made several relief cuts in the rubber so that you can release it off of all of that detail. As you can see, the piece is so big and cumbersome that it was designed to be cast in 4 pieces and then assembled on top of the column.
And we've used it quite a few times, and it does degrade over time. It doesn't actually last forever, unfortunately.
No, you do have a limited amount of detail with it. We've spoken some about terracotta. This is a prime example of a piece that fell off a building on North Wheeling, and in this case has to be replicated. So you can see in this case that running a molding would not do as an original. So in this case, you would have to use clay to fill in all of the missing details once you've glued these 2 pieces together. And once this has been reformed, you can then make a mold with a mold rubber with this piece to cast the original piece. So these are all relatively standard, happens pretty often. There are a few projects that's waiting for us that's very exciting. One is a bit of a surprise that I want to share with you. On the porch of the Fort Henry Club, on the pillars, on the columns, there were originally some vases that I presume contained flowers at a time. And we found an original that came from there. And one of the nice projects we have, and I'll show you what the original looked like, it is to replicate that and to put those back on each one of those columns again. Bekah, if you want to shift us to the next table.
Yes, sir.
Maybe if you stand on this side, then I can work down this side. How about that?
Okay. We'll get you situated.
I'll bring us over there.
Hang on, everybody.
So that is an original top, and in fragments, here are the original bottom pieces. And the original bottom pieces were found still attached to one of the piers. So we know for a definite fact that those were the original pieces that belonged. Here's another fragment that we found. And so our task will now be to take those little pieces, glue them all back together into original shape. So all of these surfaces are nice and fair. Then make a mold of this piece, and at the same time make an inside and an outside mold of this piece. Cast them in GFRC, and then put them back on the piers. Very enjoyable. Stay tuned. So And for knives, I've been telling you, come in all kinds of sizes and shapes. This, as you can tell, was the original knife that was made to run the plaster of Paris piece for the column bases. Now, the reason why the column bases had to be cast in GFRC is that the wood pieces being in contact with the ground are made in many segments and they don't tend to last very well. In GFRC, they have an indefinite lifespan, and as an acceptable replication, it was more doable to do it that way to make it last longer. But in order to make a reproduction, the original pieces were so bad, deteriorated, that we could not use that as a mold, so we had to make the original. In this case, the form was made that completely mimicked the existing. A fulcrum point was established, and we made an armature, put plaster of Paris on it, and that gave us the original piece to make this one. And yeah, Bekah is bringing us a piece there that was cast out of the mold for that, so you can kind of see what that looks like.
Right there.
There we go.
It's a 120-pound section of the column base.
Right. So if I I can't reach it, but that's the way that was made. Or at least the original was made to make the mold. I think I had that upside down. But anyway, so Bekah, how are we doing time-wise?
We're doing fine.
We are? How
Yeah,
much time
we
we
have
got left?
18 minutes.
18 minutes left. So I
That's
wanted
perfect.
to show you in a very miniature way, which is what our time affords, how plaster molding would actually look like. So in this case, it might have grown some, but anyway. But there is the piece we want to form. This might be existing on the ceiling in a circle or a semicircle or something like that. And now we want to replicate it, which means we form a piece of metal, and this little piece of copper that we have left over in the shop, and we put it on a shoe, which is this wooden part. And now we create a fulcrum that will give us our desired arc. And then we form plaster of Paris in front of it on a table that's been prepared, such as this. And that'll give us, within a few minutes, a stick of plaster that you can use to replicate that. And Bekah, I'm going to come around and I'm going to start mixing some there and we'll fun.
Okay.
Brilliant what I'm watching. Okay, we'll start off with a little bit of water in this one, and a little bit of water in this one, and maybe even a little bit of water in this one. So we're going to make 3 mixes here. Each is going to be a little thinner, a little thicker than the rest. Plaster of Paris is formed into the water, sprinkled into the water, until it forms a peak. There is no set formula, weight-wise or volume-wise, to mix plaster of Paris into water. Okay, there's too many variations. You're always looking at forming a peak, which then settles to give you the mixture. In this case, can you see that peak?
Yeah.
Can you see that peak forming? So this is what we look at. That gives us one peak. Now we're making 2 more mixtures, and both of these are going to be a little thinner. So we're looking for less of a peak into the water on these 2. And while that's slaking, we'll prepare these 2. You can see we have less of a peak on this one, and this one even less than that.
Marmalade, get out of
And there's our third one. So these are pre-prepared, and of course, normally much larger batches for much larger projects. But in this case, this is all we need. I'm going to reach across here, mixer, and have greased this old shop floor. Of course, we can't be in a casting seater. We can't move around too much. But basically, in the path where we're going to move, we're just pouring some material. We take some excess out of our way. And you can already see just immediately that we're starting to form the shape that we want. From here on, it's a question of waiting for the right moment, because this is splash repairs. It sets up very quickly, but it does have a curing time, very short, but we're playing that curing time in order to get the minimum amount of pulls through this wet material. And it does work better if you get messy in the process. An issue that I have no problem with. I get very, very messy in this process. And I really worry about anybody that can do this type of work without getting messy. So there you can see the shape starting to take place. And I will get, just for expediency, I'll get rid of some of the excess at the moment. And now we're waiting for it to dull up just a little bit. And you can see where our surface is really shiny at the moment. It's going to turn as it cures, as it sets up chemically. It's going to turn and get a little dull. As soon as it does, it is our sign that we can do the next layer. So normally this is done in our casting shop, which is difficult to take you to at this moment without a lot of interruption in the meantime. And it's done on prepared tables rather than the wood workshop table for rough wood that we have here in the wood workshop, but it is the same type of principle. We're slowly turning. You can see we're getting a little dull, a little less shiny. It's kind of like a kettle boiling. It works best when you're not watching it. But we are getting there. I'm going to do one more pull through just for still a little bit wet. So normally on big projects, we, as in the church project where there's a lot of replication to be made, we'll build our work tables right in the workshop, and we'll do the replication right there. So it's not uncommon to have 4 or 5 of these big tables with molds running on them all at the same time, as we did at St. Patrick's Church. It is not very common to have projects like that. It's very uncommon, and St. Patrick's itself was very, very enjoyable because you did not, we did so many facets on that one project. We had both the decorative plaster work as well as the ornamental work, refinishing all the ornamental work as well as the decorative painting, as well as the painting in general, and then we did a new ceramic floor at the same time. Very unusual to do so much. Do we have any questions on there, Becca, that we need to answer while we're waiting a little bit for this to set?
We have one question about whether there was ever a danger of the Fort Henry porch collapsing.
The weight of the porch is distributed a relatively small period of a small amount of weight over a lot of bearing surface. So no, it would have continued settling, but there was never any fear of it collapsing at any stage. I think unmitigated, it would have just kept on growing and expanding and set up, and it would have done that for a long time before there was any fear of collapse. Definitely not a fear of any of the columns collapsing.
Mm-hmm. Even with the bases under a lot of pressure and collapsing a little bit, it was just being crushed.
Correct.
But
And
it was
just settled
always,
more
yeah,
and
it
more.
was always just a settlement. It wasn't actually more of a failure.
And I'm off screen, just cleaning our mold as we're waiting. And it's a little bit surprising, as warm as we are today. I would have thought that it would be setting off a lot quicker.
We don't have air conditioning in our shop, so we're always sweating in the summertime.
We're still moving quite a bit. We haven't really set off quite enough.
We have a couple other questions if you want to.
Yes, absolutely.
Elizabeth asks, how is the cost of restoration determined?
It's never enough. So, you know, our buildings last, they last 500 years only if they're rebuilt every 50. You know, you have things like, you have daily maintenance, you have cleaning on a regular basis and that type of maintenance. Then you have weekly maintenance, monthly maintenance, you have yearly maintenance, but every 50 years or so, any building, doesn't care where or what, has to be rebuilt. I mean, it's simply, there's structurally sound reasons why somebody has to be redone at that stage. And when you dig into an old building, such as Fort Henry, you find surprises. Even though you've had experience in similar buildings before, there's always surprises. And it's called discovery, and a discovery is expensive. You know, as you find a new layer of damage, a new solution and a new price clause has to be established for that type of work. It's not cheap. It is expensive. It's time consuming. And unfortunately, that is the name of the game. It is very hard to determine up front. If a sum total could be given to the whole project up front, I can guarantee you that the contractor will go bankrupt. There is just so many discoveries that have to be accommodated in between, and you know that when you get into an old building project that you are going to find that. Mm-hmm. Does that answer that question reasonably?
I think as well as you can.
Okay. I'm going to try and draw this.
Okay, hold on. Let me move the camera again. All right, there we go. Ready.
Okay.
It's like magic.
Okay, so you can see it's starting to shape a little bit better, but we are still surprisingly wet for as warm as we are. We have another question too. Okay.
Yes, Aaron Rothenbuehler asks, what has been the most challenging project you've ever taken on? Wait, you guys see your face on.
So as you remember, I told you that Erin did an enormous amount of work at St. Patrick's Church, and I don't have to ask her what her most challenging project was. And I think her most challenging project was working with me. For many reasons, different projects have different challenges. A lot of the time, unfortunately, economics is part of the challenge. To do the maximum you can do for a project and still stay within budget and still stay within the time constraints that your budget allows. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but unfortunately, that's very often one of the worst challenges that you have. I wish it wasn't. Very often, you tend to fall in love with your projects because you care, and this is what you chose to do. and you want to take on the burden that belongs to the building and belongs to the client, and you want to do more than the budget allows. And that's often the most challenging part of restoration for a contractor. Budgets being what they are always constrained. There's always a limit to the amount of money that you can spend. There's never a limit to the amount of problems and what more you can do. You can always do more. So finding that compromise between what can be done with the budget, with the time allowed, and what you can live with, that's the hardest part for me. Per project, every project has its own challenges. The St. Patrick's project I did with you certainly had enough of its own, budget being only one of the many challenges on that one. But I'm sure that when we talk about challenges in a project, we should get Erin Rothenbuehler on here to tell us about some of those challenges she's had.
She can do the
several
next
of
live
them.
stream.
There you go. There you go.
Are you ready to go again?
Yeah, I'm going to wait just a little bit longer.
Okay,
for
we
this
got one
to
more
see.
question we can answer. I think I
Okay.
can answer this one.
Okay.
Who is the Fort Henry Club architect? And are there, oh, come stop being cameraman. And are there other buildings from the architect which are similar in architectural features to the Fort Henry Club? I believe it was Franzine who did the Fort Henry Club renovations. Originally, Fort Henry Club was a house. It belonged to the Howell family. I don't believe they were the original owners. I think it was built around 1850. So they kept adding on to the building. You can see the front 2 stories minus the sun porch. If you're looking from Chaplin, that's the original house. Then they added a 3rd story, and I believe that was in 1890. And then at some point, turn of the century, they added the 4th story and a large addition on the back. And I believe Franzine was the one who did those designs. It's an interesting question that you ask, Chuck, because parts of the big columns on the front porch, we're going to need to do Dutchmans because the rot in the water around the very edge of the bottom of the columns just made the columns, we're not able to fix that even with epoxy. So we're going to be doing Dutchman, and what the Dutchman is replacing that wood with a similar or like wood in the same pattern. And we have discovered that the Ogilvy Mansion Museum columns are the same size. The bases are different, the capitals are different. The original columns are the same size, which I don't think they actually know who did the porch renovations up at Ogilvy Mansion, but that was also about the same time that Fort Henry was probably done. So it was probably Franzine as well. So we are going to be using portions of those original columns that they replaced those in maybe 2008, and they took all the original columns off and put new columns in that were exact replicas, but they put the original ones in storage. So we're going to be taking parts of those original columns and using them in the Fort Henry porch columns. So it's a good question.
And a part of the reason why we do that is that the wood is of the same species and have the same amount of earrings, and it's best to use compatible material. So it's not as much the shape that we are looking to save, it's mostly the type of material, and that's mostly why we're doing it. We are surprisingly slow with our set.
Is it the humidity in here?
Probably, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but because we have a timeline, I want to get the program completed.
We're okay. We got 7 minutes. We're
We have
taking
7
care.
minutes?
Yeah, we're taking care of questions as we
no
go
pressure.
along. So
Okay, we have another question.
not. Yes, we do actually.
Okay,
Are you ready?
Yeah.
What should a young person do if they are interested in learning restoration work?
Belmont University,
College.
Belmont College.
Close.
So Bekah is a graduate from Belmont College,
As is Aaron.
as is Erin Rothenbuehler, as is quite a few of the people that work for Adventures and Elegance. Belmont College produces a 2-year program on, Bekah, tell us about it because you know about that.
Sure.
Oh, you want to?
You go ahead. I can talk while you're working.
Oh, okay.
So Belmont College, they have a program, a nationally known program, one of the oldest in the country, in fact, called Building Preservation and Restoration. And it's what actually brought me to Wheeling in the Ohio Valley from Morgantown. I was in college there and took a class. And we came up to Belmont and did a sampling of some of the courses they taught there. They do everything from blacksmithing to stained glass restoration. You learn plaster repairs, carpentry, You know, everything that has to do with an old building and fixing it, they teach you. So it is what I came up to do, the program. And I stayed because I love wheeling so much. But it's a great program. You know, there's all sorts of people from all walks of life who come. It's not just, it's a 2-year program. So it's not just necessarily kids straight out of high school, even though I know that they are eager to see some of the younger people. But there were a lot of people like me who have advanced degrees already who wanted to come and learn the hands-on side of things. People who come from, you know, getting their master's degree at one of the big colleges, you know, in New York, and they come to do the program because it is special and it's an exceptional program. There are several like it in the country, but of course I'm partial to Belmont. So that's my Belmont College shout out.
Traditionally, trades were taught through an apprenticeship situation where young people would find an accomplished tradesperson to sell their time to, and in the process of selling their time cheaply, they would learn the trade over many years and eventually go off on their own and do a trade of their own. Unfortunately, to a great extent, this whole process has fallen by the wayside and doesn't happen much to our detriment, I'm afraid. The need for restoration trades professionals throughout the country is dire. The supply is very poor. You know, history is a story that we ignore at our own peril. The times we live in, as I don't need to tell you, is of historic proportions. We will be asked later as to how we survived this time. This is not normal times. And context is only fine when you go back to history. And it is such with buildings. Buildings are just the manifestations of people's lives and the choices they've made in their lives. I believe that as such, stories have an immense value. And I believe that today, what we are needing is not more politicians, more salespeople. There's plenty of both. What we need are storytellers to give us back the context of our lives and why we live and why it matters. And as such, I believe that stories matter. Becca, I'm going to run one more line. It's probably as much time as we have, don't we?
Yeah, it's a little after one. But wait, we should probably make sure there's no more questions.
Okay.
As well. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask while we're doing the last run.
I am pushing this a little bit. Normally I would wait just a little bit longer. But due to time constraints, I am running this a little longer.
And that's a good example of how plaster can be fickle, especially with temperature and humidity in the air. As you can see, with every pass that he does, it looks cleaner and cleaner and the lines sharper.
And eventually we will end up with that. And in a few minutes, under normal circumstances, in another 15 minutes or so, we should be able to pick that up from the table. And that should give you a new thing.
And because of the release that he put on the table, it'll come off easily.
Yeah. We are all individuals, and the slice of life that we taste is different than any other person's because of our unique genetic makeup and our unique experiences. I love the opportunity to share our little slice with you and the history that we make, the stories that we tell. I happen to love stories, and it's very clear to see. If you have any doubt, these are 2 books I've published of short stories. If you want to sample some of those and sample some of what that tastes like, go to the Facebook page and watch the Stories by Sarel page, and you'll be able to sample some of the slice of life and some of the scents that I've made out of them.
And if you ever run into Sarel, these are his calling cards, so you will get one.
You won't be too surprised to find one.
Sure. Let me check and make sure we have any more questions. Thanks everyone for the great comments. Thanks for joining us here today. Chuck asks who and what will be in the restored building. The first floor in the porch project was actually pushed because there was a restaurant tenant for the first floor.
which that fell through, unfortunately. So I don't believe there's any immediate plans for the first floor. The porch was supposed to be outdoor seating, but they have moved forward, with plans. So if you know anyone who's looking for a restaurant space or any kind of space, it will be a fantastic place. The fourth floor is what the imminent project, the immediate project is. The McKinley and Associates offices are going to be moving into the fourth floor. So that's very exciting. The owners of the building is technically Fort Henry LLC, and they're doing wonderful things for the property and the building. It's finally getting the love and the work that the place needs. It's a lot of work, and it's a big project, and it's admirable that they're taking it on.
Absolutely.
So, Heidi asks, is it a tax credit project? Yes, it's a big tax credit project. We have not encountered anything yet with the substitution of materials. They did do a development on the first floor. We were not involved with that. We did do some plaster repair for them. But I know from the architect, Christina Schlesser, I think it's been quite a journey getting those tax credits through. So I think they did learn a lot from that project. And everything that we have done on the porch, I guess it's important to note that it is all historic preservation approved.
Yes.
Everything is SHPO approved. Replacing the capitals with GFRC instead of terracotta, it's more of a cost issue, but it is an acceptable replication, as is the bases, making them out of GFRC, the glass fiber reinforced concrete instead of wood. Their problem, and it's something we see with columns all around Wheeling, is that whenever it's wood, water gets wicked up from the porch, especially when it's a different material like stone. The stone gets wet, the water gets wicked up the wood, and it actually rots the bottoms of the columns. And it's an issue with probably every column in Wheeling. So making that out of GFRC will slow that water coming up the column shaft.
So the reason why the column bases fail is that if you make it out of one solid piece of wood, there will always be end grain somewhere around the circumference, and the end grain will attract the water, and you will have expansion, contraction, cracking as a result. So the option is to make it out of many segments, each of which hides the end grain and only shows the side grain. Now it means that you have multiple joints, and as the joints fail, they invite the water in, and basically all of it due to lack of maintenance. But the only sure way long-term with the materials we have today to ensure that it won't happen again and to stop the migration of water between the floor and the wood of the column is to do the GFRC.
And you've done that in quite a few projects.
Yes, we have.
Yes. All right, I think that's all the questions I see. Well,
it's been a pleasure spending time with you. Thank you for visiting us in our shop. I thank the Public Library for a wonderful event and a showcase. And we thank you for spending time with us, and we'll see you next time in a story somewhere.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.